Hello! Don't know why I keep starting videos like that. Anyway, I want to talk about Dead of Night. It's a film from 1945, starring Michael Redgrave and others. Googie Withers apparently, which is a rather bizarre name. It was produced by Ealing Studios, which is a very famous studio in Britain, sort of post-war. And it's the granddaddy of the anthology horror film. Now, anthology horror films, anthology horror is my favourite genre. If you're wondering what an anthology horror film is, well, it's an anthology film in general, or portmanteau film as you might hear it called, is a film that has a bunch of different stories in it that are often disconnected from one another. So think of it as like a bunch of short stories, short films together, and then often they have what's called a wraparound. So they have an overall story that somehow connects the shorter films. For example, Creepshow, which is a really famous anthology horror film from the 1980s, which was directed by George Romero and written by Stephen King. The wraparound in that is that each of the stories is from a comic book. So you kind of get the idea from Beyond the Grave, another great one from the Amicus Studios, who produced some of the best anthology horror films. The wraparound from Beyond the Grave is that people are basically stealing from an antique shop, and everything that they steal, something revolving around that item, ends up cursing the person, the thief. Okay, so you get the idea. Short films, short stories, wraparound story running through it. So Ealing Studios produced Dead of Night, and it was really important because although there had been some earlier anthology horror films, or anthology films in general, this is the one that really solidified the conventions of the genre, the one that basically every other anthology horror film afterwards followed the rules set up by this, and then it became its own subgenre of horror. So Dead of Night is about it basically follows a group of people that are in a sort of luxurious mansion, as a lot of sort of British films were at that time, filmed as if we all lived in mansions at that time. And one man arrives there and he claims to have had a terrible dream about something horrific that would happen at the mansion, but he can't quite remember what it is. Anyway, this leads on to people telling stories that they've, dreams that they've had that perhaps felt like premonitions or were rather spooky or scary, and we get to see each of these in a story segment, and it's very good. It's really good, actually. I hope you're not one of these people that thinks, oh, it's black and white, or it's, you know, an earlier film. You know, it's some of the best films ever made came from this era. A lot of people don't like 1940s cinema. I really do. A lot of people perhaps go to 1930s or the silent era, and then they jump forward to the sort of 60s and 70s. But you know, there's some real gems out there from this time. Dead of Night is one of them. There are quite a few stories in it. There's one story that involves a sort of children's party, and how there might be a ghost child in amongst the children that are there, and another one involves a man who foresees his own death, basically. And there is one of the conventions that this film started is that normally there'd be one comedic story, which is you often find in most anthology horror films. There's one comedic story, one funny story that you see, and the rest are a little bit more serious. But the story that most people talk about is the one starring Michael Redgrave, and it's about a ventriloquist and his puppet. I was going to say ventriloquist operator. A ventriloquist and his puppet, and the double act that they have, and there seems to be this friction between the puppet and him, and the question really is the puppet sentient? Is it real? Is it a creature? Is it alive? You know, is it really just a trick? And it really plays out all about sort of jealousy and paranoia, and Michael Redgrave's character's really frightened that the puppet will be taken away from him by another act and things like that. But it's genuinely creepy. Most, I mean, puppets, dolls, they tend to be creepy in horror films anyway, but this is one of the most memorable ones involving puppets or dolls. So definitely check this out. It's absolutely wonderful, and it's a great introduction to anthology horror. Can't recommend it highly enough. Go check it out.